You're watching the Flint Film Foundation Podcast, hosted by Flint, Michigan Films, created inside the Dort Mall. The Flint Film Foundation is a local nonprofit focused on creating community impact through film, television, and social content with an emphasis on education and community storytelling. If you'd like to learn more, please visit flintfilmfoundation.org. Joel Arnold.
Hey, how's it going?
Welcome to the Flint Film Foundation Podcast.
Happy to be here. Thanks so much.
I'm excited.
Yeah, I know.
I know. Corey keeps telling me my hair's going crazy. Is it okay now?
Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
Don't lie to
It's
me.
perfect. No, I would never. Yeah. So, Joel, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Long-time listener, first-time caller.
That's
But,
right.
yeah, we've been hanging out for a couple of years now, just on and off the volleyball court.
Yeah.
And yeah, I remember you when Facebook land, you stepped down from the Friends of the Alley board, and I was like, "What's happening?" Well, now do you want to tell them what's happening?
Yeah, so I announced a couple weeks ago that I'm running for the 5th Ward seat in the Flint City Council. So I'm excited about it. The current councilwoman, Jerry Winfrey Carter, is not running for another term, so it's an open seat. And I'm happy to be here and talk today about why I'm doing this, why I'm passionate about this, and why I'm so excited about this race.
It's so exciting. Who do you have any who else is running?
Oh, there's quite a few.
Is there quite a few?
The list, it kind of grows and changes, each day, but I know several other candidates from the community: Dwan Robinson, Wantoise Davis, Jerron Dotson.
Wow.
So it's a pretty large field right now, and we're all sort of in petition collection phase, gathering signatures from voters to get on the ballot.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm excited for you, friend.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm
I
looking
love
forward to it.
I love it. So what made you, have you always been into politics? Like, how did you
Yeah.
get into it? I want to know the story, Joel.
Yeah.
I don't know this. I don't really know this part about you.
Yeah, I mean,
we just play volleyball and
Yeah, I know, right?
we win.
Yeah, I mean, I can kind of give the whole backstory if you want.
I want to hear.
Yeah, so I was, my family's lived in and around Flint for, decades, like generations. So we first, my family moved here actually to where the Job Corps site is on North Saginaw back in the 19-teens. And our family's kind of been in and around Flint, for the better part of, 110 years in this area. And so I was born in McLaren over on the west side of town. I know not too far from your house. Mm-hmm. And grew up in Davison, but all my whole life, my childhood, high school, was always really interested in politics and public service, and not so much interested in politics as like the sport of it. I think there's some people that get into politics because they like red versus blue. They see it as a way to almost give out like a competitive urge. But for me, like, I enjoy watching sports for that reason. I'm a Michigan State fan. I get out my competitive urges, rooting against Michigan. Mm-hmm. So my interest in politics always came from this real interest in like trying to solve problems. So I, when I was younger, started working on political campaigns, even when I was in high school. And when I was really young, was on a youth advisory council at the Community Foundation of Greater Flint. That's like when I was 16, wow. Thinking about how to make grants in the community to help our neighbors. And then after I graduated from high school, went to Michigan State. And I went to a program called James Madison College, which is their public policy college, focused on, my degree was focused on social policy. Okay. So in specific, how do we do things like urban development and community development, but in a way that's working with folks, not kind of the horrors we saw with things like I-475 and 20th century kind of neighborhood development.
Yeah.
So did that work at Michigan State. While I was there, actually interned at the city of Flint and did planning work here in the community. Got to work with a ton of folks throughout that process. Graduated from MSU in 2015. Took a job at the city of Flint, working in the planning department. So moved back from East Lansing to Flint. And did that work, actually worked in the Blight office for about 3 years. So if anybody knows, that's the office that handles all code enforcement and blight complaints in the city. So every year, about 4,000 complaints. Mm-hmm. I was the guy on the other end of the phone.
I'm sorry.
I know. But that was my job, right? Every single day was to talk to neighbors about the burned out house down the block, or the dumping on your street, or the lot that had 10-foot high grass that you were afraid of walking by at night because you don't know what's in it. And how do we solve those problems, right? So I did that job for 3 years. I loved it. I got to work with people in every corner of this city. And we really got to solve a lot of problems, which was really, really exciting. And it also taught me the importance of how to work with other folks, because in our community, no one's coming to save us. And so it's going to be incumbent on us to step up. So we used to do things like we'd support 100 neighborhood cleanups a year, respond to those 4,000 complaints. We used to board up about 400 to 500 houses a year. And my job was really to try to coordinate all that work, get grants. And my boss at the time was a guy named Raul Garcia, who had been a City of Flint firefighter, the firefighter union president, and really taught me a lot about how important it is to work with folks. And so after that, I got lucky. I went to grad school overseas, got a scholarship from the U.S.-Ireland Alliance, lived in Ireland, got a degree there in urban policy, lived in Philadelphia for 3 years doing similar work, community development, working with neighbors to build up community in a collaborative, really democratic way. And then, but I always knew I wanted to come home. Yeah. So it was summer of 21, I moved back to Flint, rented an apartment and took a job with Communities First, which is where I work today. As our planning and advocacy manager, where my job is basically to make sure we're building affordable housing, reinvesting in neighborhoods, but also advocating for good public policy at the federal level, state level, local level. And that work's really been a blessing as well. So that's kind of a little bit of background on how I got into this, but it's really a belief that we've got a lot of big problems, but they're really solvable if we focus on them.
Right.
And so that's really my belief in this council race is, we've had a lot of problems, and nothing's more annoying to me than when people present them as intractable, because they're all solvable with the right attention and resources and approach, and I think we can do that.
Yeah. So I was looking a little bit about the university out in Ireland. It's like a top 1% in the entire world school. It's like that's kind of a blessing.
Yeah. Oh, it was such a blessing.
Yeah. And was that just because of the type of work that you were doing?
Yeah, I mean, it's a competitive scholarship program, so they usually get about 350 or so applications every year from across the country. They select a dozen Americans to go over there. And I wrote, and my entire sort of application was about this, I want to study programs in places that have dealt with a lot of disinvestment and have seen losses in population and economic changes, and how did places respond to that? Because I'd studied a lot of that at Michigan State, and I'd seen a lot of this work here, but I thought there'd be a lot to be gained in studying this in an international perspective, right? Because the kind of things that Flint faces are not that different from the kind of things that other cities that are post-industrial that had a big manufacturing base and lost it have faced, and that's whether it's Flint and Detroit, or Manchester and Liverpool in England, or Belfast in Ireland, or Windsor in Canada. Have seen a lot of these. What do you do in a community when your economic base up and leaves? And how do you make that transition? And so it was a great opportunity to study those kind of things, and also just a great opportunity to see other parts of the world, and learn about new perspectives from other people.
I feel like we've been on a full circle journey today, because this morning we were at the Dome in downtown.
Oh, yeah.
And we watched the movie that the documentary that Corey helped film about 475. And have you seen it yet?
I have.
Oh, it's so good.
Well, right, and I think,
but it's amazing. I was just telling people this morning. I was like, I'm 42, and I had no idea. I had no clue until I watched that documentary.
And it's not that long ago, right? There's people
the
still
80s,
alive.
70s.
The 70s when that highway got, right? I mean, it's and community leaders in our community. Charles Winfrey, I know, spoke a lot about that and these are people still elected officials today representing in our community who grew up in that neighborhood that's gone, right? And it's gone because people in positions of power made mistakes, in many ways intentionally disinvested in communities of color in order to put a highway in so that we could get somewhere 6 minutes faster. Was that worth it? And so it makes you wonder, what if a different set of people were in power at that time to make different decisions? We'd still have two thriving, vibrant neighborhoods that we don't have anymore.
What would you say is the different ways that they solved problem overseas versus the way that we currently solve problems when it comes to that? Because that was a big thing, is just the way, their differences of how they're solving problems, their attitudes towards it.
Yeah. I mean, naturally, a lot of, especially if you think about larger European countries, or there's just a much larger state safety net in a lot of ways to address these issues. So if you fall, you're often caught. If you think about it that way, you're caught much more quickly, whether it's through things like easier access to education, or better investments in, physical and mental health. Those really help a lot of folks. But another thing, those kind of investments pay dividends, right? So you make investments in education, it makes it easier for your community to attract, high wage, high talent jobs, because people come into your community know that there's going to be an educated workforce there. And I think probably the closest allegory we have in America is you think of a place like Boston, right? Boston spent decades, centuries as a town entirely built on like shipping, right? But what's Boston now? MIT, Harvard, and what's it all based on? Health sciences, technology, things that are completely different than the reason that city was created. And yet it changed to respond to new economic circumstances. And you saw that, when I lived in Dublin, there was an entire district that was called the Docklands, which was, again, a center for like shipping, ports. It's an island country. And throughout the middle of the 20th century, all that closed. And it became an entire part of the city that was derelict and disinvested. And now it's become a center of tech jobs, multinational investment, because of really focused government policy that reinvested in those communities through creative subsidy to new businesses that came in, through scaling up education investments so people knew when they came that there'd be people there who'd want to work and be able to work at those places. And so I think sometimes like it's very incumbent on us to do those sorts of things locally as well, and that's got to be good partnerships with our public school system, investments in places like Kettering and U of M Flint, Mott Community College. And I think that will help our region be a lot more competitive. Because if you see the kind of Rust Belt communities, those communities kind of that have lost a lot of factory jobs, the ones that have rebounded, have really been a lot of those ones that have invested in things like education, public safety, but from a holistic perspective. And whether that's in Pittsburgh or whether that's in Buffalo or whether that's in even Detroit in a lot of recent years, you've seen a lot of those changes.
You've been working in Flint for a long time now, and you've made a lot of really big strides in the community through your board, the Friends of the Alley, also through Communities First. Tell me a little bit about your work with Friends of the Alley.
Yeah, so Friends of the Alley, for those who might not know, it's a all volunteer run nonprofit that's been around for about 16 years now. Started in 2010. It's what everyone really knows it for. It's the organization that puts on Alley Fest every year, which is a great fun event, great music festival. I always think Alley Fest and Drop Fest are like the two great free downtown music festivals every summer. But beyond the work that Friends of the Alley does at that one day, 365 days a year, Friends of the Alley is focused on beautifying, cleaning, improving downtown and public space in downtown. And so one of the big commitments of that and why FODA does that, FODA being Friends of the Alley, is because we've got a lot of great spaces in our community, but oftentimes our public spaces are really disinvested. So we have an incredible art museum and we have an incredible history museum and we've got great universities, but they all operate on like hours. They're not totally publicly accessible at certain times of day. Whereas our public spaces, our parks, our streets, our sidewalks are oftentimes really disinvested. And so what Friends of the Alley does is, you'll notice the string lights in the alley are up 365 days a year. That's something Friends of the Alley puts up. When I was on the board, one big thing that we did that we noticed was on the weekends, our Downtown Development Authority, which is responsible for cleaning up the trash downtown, a lot of the work that takes place in downtown beautification, the Downtown Development Authority or the DDA does. But on the weekends, they don't.
Yeah.
And so you would have people totally normal on a Friday night, Saturday morning, you'd come out and there'd be a bunch of trash all around, right?
Yeah.
And in a lot of cases, it would just sit till Monday.
Yeah.
But so if we're a city that's trying to draw people in,
right.
and you come to our downtown to go to any number of businesses and the first thing that you see is a bunch of trash,
right,
it's going to impact your view of our whole city. And so one thing that I really spearheaded when I was on that board and worked with other folks was we started up a weekend cleaning program. So we hired Flint residents that now go out every Saturday and Sunday and pick up trash all through downtown so that no matter what day of the week you come to our city, it's clean and welcoming. So other things that we did, we expanded where the lights were, because we know, right, when we think about public safety, a lot of times we always think about it as police, but we know so much more goes into it than that. And lighting is one of those things, right? And so we expanded where the lights go so that it's a more bright, welcoming experience. The lights have been up long enough now. There's some people in our city that don't even remember what the alleys were like without them, but it was a very different space. And so we also did things like public art, murals to make the space more inviting, decorative planters so that it's not so harsh. And all these things seem small, but when you add up to that, on one end you could have an alley, and when you think about an alley, you think about a Christopher Nolan movie, and it's, a dark space and it's unwelcoming. But what Friends of the Alley's done a lot of is like these can be bright, welcoming, clean, inviting spaces. And what that also does is then it makes people want to open businesses there, right? So some of the members of that, I was on the board of Friends of the Alley. A good friend of mine, Sheena Harrison, started Drinks of Essence bartending school, right? And it's a bartending school totally in an alley, right? The Torch Bar and Grill is a great business entirely in an alley. There's barbershops entirely in the alley. And that's kind of unique to Flint compared to some of our other cities around here. And so I think the work we did at Friends of the Alley was this real belief that you shouldn't have to make a bunch of money or pay rent or follow opening hours schedule to enjoy great spaces in Flint. And so we did that work over and over and over again so that we would have great inviting public spaces that weren't just great for Friends of the Alley to program, but what you notice is that other organizations program events in the alley.
Right.
You know, whether it was Drop Fest, whether it's been Antidote Fest, whether it's been, my friend Key Rail Caton did an event called Glizzy Fest one year.
And that was hilarious.
Right. And 810 Day, right? And these all take place in the alley. And so the point isn't to improve the alleys for Friends of the Alley. The Friends of the Alley's mission is to improve the alleys for everybody. And so then it becomes this stage, this space that hopefully feels more welcoming and inviting to people. And so I was on that board for 4 years, served as the secretary for 2 years, the vice president for a year, and the president for a year. And I really loved that work. It was a ton of fun and really rewarding.
And that, seems to be, something that you're really passionate about is I think when a lot of people think of like solving problems, they think of like all the big problems first. Yeah. But you know what I mean? I think it's just like just little things. Like, I mean, imagine that you get a brand new car, you know what I mean? It's awesome and it's pristine and it's perfect. And then you get that first little nick and then you're like, whatever, you know what I mean? So I think like paying attention to those details, I think are more important. And I really like those like attention to details that like, I know you're a big advocate for parking. And can you tell me a little bit about your theory on like the parking situations and making like, because how I understand, like when I was going over to Europe, like this places are designed for people, where we're more designed for like cars. Yeah. So just give me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things. One really important thing that we can do for, I think, our neighbors and folks in general is to design and build more walkable, pedestrian-friendly, inviting spaces. And I think sometimes that gets coded as like, there's this interest of people who really like cities and it's quirky and kitschy, but it won't work. And I think what we see over and over again, right, especially in a city like Flint, right, we have parts of our city where a full third of households have no access to a vehicle of any kind, So they're relying on the bus, they're walking, they're biking. And very often, by building out a city that's so committed just to if you own a car, those folks really have a hard time accessing amenities and resources and getting to the doctor and getting to school. And so one thing we've done, I think, in downtown Flint over the years, right, is we've demolished a lot of our city, about 50 acres, and in that part of the city, but more in the rest of our city. Up by Buick City, GM acquired whole sections of houses and knocked them down for parking lots. We've seen this all over town. And what happens in the long run is the city winds up poorer off with less revenue. Because what could have been thriving businesses or homes or shops, you can no longer they're not generating property tax, right? And so what I think is really, really important as we build these spaces is that we're building these walkable spaces, not that you can't drive into, right? Because at the end of the day, we live in Michigan, we live in America, people are going to have cars and they need to have a place to park them. But we need to have systems that make it easier for you to do that, make it understandable to do that throughout our city, while at the same time making sure that if you're relying on the bus or if you're walking, or if you're a student coming into town or you're living here in town or you're in between jobs and you just don't have money for a car, that you don't feel like a second-class citizen. Right. And so often when we design all these spaces exclusively for, folks that are able to afford a vehicle to the expense of other folks and not giving people options, I think it really makes our community less brought together. And you see it very often, right? The spaces that people in our community want to gather in. Where do they want to gather in, right? They want to gather in well-invested and maintained public spaces, right? Whether it's Max Brandon Park, whether it's the jazz concerts, that they do down by Thread Lake, whether it's, Riverbank Park, whether it's, the Haskell Community Center that's getting reinvestment in right now. Those are good investments. I very rarely see people doing huge gatherings in, a giant empty parking lot. Right. Next to a factory site, right?
Especially in the summer.
Right? Yeah, right. It's hot. It's unwelcoming. And so I just think it's really important that as we invest in places, we think about what are the kind of places that are going to make everybody in our city feel like they belong? But also, as a city that's always short on revenue and with residents that cannot afford to pay more in taxes, what are the kind of developments that we can encourage that'll give us more revenue as a city to do things like pay for police and fire and EMS and parks, and demolishing a lot of buildings without replacing them with something is not a particularly good way to do that, you know? And that's how you wind up with, I think, a lot of the disinvestment that we've seen over the years. Now, there's a lot of other reasons from state policy, obviously huge racial discrimination, redlining that's caused those issues. Mm-hmm. But I think sometimes the way that we approach, you know, land use has caused major problems as well.
Yeah. And so, I mean, it just sounds like you everyone's like, oh, what made you want to run to solve this particular issue? But it just seems like you've always kind of just been in that lane. Did you run for any student body in high school?
You know, oddly enough, I did not. No, yeah. I never did. I was in the Spartan marching band in college at Michigan State, and I did run for squad leader and got elected twice. You know, so so that was a big thing.
So you've been tried and true. Like, you've been tested as a leader, basically.
Yeah. No, it's you know, it's been a great time. Yeah, I got 4 years I was there. I got elected that position my junior and senior year, and it's, you know, you kind of come to part of the leadership of that organization.
And you played trombone?
I did. I still do. Yeah, I played trombone. Yeah, I played trombone.
Talking about, I was like, Joel doesn't play the trombone.
Yeah, I play trombone still today in a band over at the FIM every Wednesday night.
Do you really?
I do.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
Guess we're gonna have to die. That's what we're gonna do.
Monday night volleyballs. Wednesday night, go watch Joel play trombone.
That's how it works.
I like it.
I noticed you didn't mention avid volleyball player.
I wouldn't want to subject anybody to watching me play volleyball. It's not an impressive experience.
No, I think the city of Flint would like a city council member with some mad ups, dude. He'd be like, you know what I mean?
You know, it's the benefit of being 6'5" with, I think, a 2-inch vertical is it looks like a big leap.
Just put Joel by the net. That's all we know. That's
the goal.
But yeah, I mean, was it just kind of like you felt like it was time to run?
Yeah, you know, it was one of those things that it's something I've always thought about wanting to do, right? And there have been other moments in my life where there's been a chance to run for things, but I didn't feel like I was ready, or I didn't feel like my life was in a place for that. And I think this year, you know, when petitions opened up and I thought about it, you know, I felt like I had spent, you know, especially like the last 4.5 years, especially at Communities First, working with neighbors, trying to reinvest in housing, you know, trying to give people the base need, right? We think, like, in life, what are like the two most important things you need every day? Food and shelter, right? If you don't have those, you're not going to get an education. You're not going to take care of yourself from a medical perspective. You're not going to do, you know, have hobbies. You know, how do you go to school if you don't have an address, you know, to go back and do homework at? How do you get a job if you're living out of your car? And yet we know a ton of people in our community do that. And so, you know, for the last 4.5 years, I've been doing this work at Communities First, trying to make sure that we're solving that problem of, you know, we're short in our county 4,000 units of affordable housing. And, you know, so it's been a great opportunity to meet with people and learn from people and try and address these, and also work with city council members. So it's also been a big educational experience, whether it's been working with the mayor's office, working with the council office, building relationship with state legislators, to try and get investment in our community, which we've been very successful at, you know, to the tune of millions of dollars coming in for new housing, new public spaces, new community centers. And I felt like that really kind of prepared me. And so when the petitions opened up, I felt like this was a good opportunity that I could serve my community in a new way. One that I love and, you know, has been a part of my whole life.
Speaking of like serving the community, what are some of the things that you'd really like kind of run on?
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing, and a lot of this comes from those years I worked in the Blight office at the city, is this real aggressive focus on the basics. You know, I think what happens a lot in Flint is people just we see a lot of like our government's failing around us all the time. And it just starts fading into the background sometimes. You know, my great example I always give is between my house in Carriagetown and the office I work out on Fenton Road. Every day when I go to and from work, I drive past not one, not two, but 5 different just burned out houses. Yeah. And they've been there for months, some of them years, right? And a lot of folks that live in our city, they see that every day. And it's a reminder of disinvestment, lack of resources, lack of ability to create change, right? But it goes into other issues, right? Where it's if you report a street light on your block and it takes 6 or 8 or 10 or 12 or 24 months to get fixed, that's not what happens in other communities, you know? If there's a house in your block that needs to get boarded up, you know, maybe it doesn't need to be demolished, but it'd be great to secure it so we can save that house for a family in the future. How long has it taken us to board that up? right? And can you track that on your end? You know, I mean, a little thing that happens is a lot of communities will, when we think about non-emergency complaints, you know, everybody knows call 911. But off the top of your head, if you had a pothole on your block, do you know what number to call?
Nope. My mom does though.
She sure does.
You know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
Or same thing, if you've got, you know, if you're on your block and there's a vacant house on the block and he's boarded up, do you know what number to call? No. But other cities have done a system, it's very common, called 311.
Yeah.
Right? Where you go on your phone, non-emergency, 311. You call and you can report things like potholes, street lights, burned out houses, boarded up houses that need help, park maintenance issues. And for whatever reason, we've just never done that. And I think it's another challenge for our residents of, okay, the pothole's out, I got to call this number. Okay, the blight problem, I got to call this different number.
Yeah.
And I think what we need both is to make it easy for residents to report the challenges that they have in their neighborhood, but also make it much quicker for the city to fix them. And a lot of that is just focus on accountability.
Yeah.
You know, so one thing that I'd love to see that other communities have done is these real measurable dashboards. You know, in the last month, we had X number of streetlights complained about and X number fixed. We had X number of potholes and we fixed this number of them. You know, we boarded up this many houses, and you should be able to go and find that kind of information because it says that like your city's working on these problems. Because I think what also people hear, and I used to hear this in the Blight office all the time, is they'd call, but maybe the voicemail box was full or somebody didn't call them back, and they would feel like, well, I called, but I actually don't know if anybody's working on this, and I haven't heard from anybody. And I think what happens is a lot of times people, once that happens to you over and over and over again, they just say like, oh, forget it, I'm moving.
Yeah.
You know, and then we lose another resident, you know.
Yeah.
The year my mom was born at Hurley, we had 200,000 people. The year I was born in McLaren, we had 120,000 people.
Yeah.
Today we have 80,000 people.
Right.
You know, and that's not a trend that we can keep going on.
No.
And it's something that I think, you know, we can't solve a lot of big economic issues, but we can certainly make sure that city government is working for you and is responsive to you.
Yeah.
And I think what we've seen, unfortunately, on council a lot is sometimes a focus on individual personalities, disagreements with each other. And I think just the general public is tired of that.
Yeah.
And I think what they want are candidates that not only have a vision to try and address these issues, but actually have proven that they know how to do that.
Yeah.
Right. And in my work, whether it was at the city, when I started in the Blight office, we were solving 38% of resident complaints. When I left, we were up in the high 70s. We were doing about 40, 50 cleanups a year. When I left, we were doing more than 100. And then, or it's my work when I've been at Communities First, right? Which is, you know, we can all drive around any day and take a look at developments that me, along with colleagues and a whole team, have taken vacant and abandoned buildings and turned into new housing, right? And I think people want to see that. So, you know, if I sum it down on any one thing, it's real like an almost hyper focus on the basics. You know, you should not be able to leave Flint and drive to Grand Blanc or any suburban community in our county and immediately notice a difference in cleanliness and quality of life, right? And this time of year, you know, where we're recording right now, you see it when the snow melts, right?
Yeah.
Snow melts, all of a sudden there's trash everywhere.
Everywhere.
It's killing me.
Right?
Yeah.
It's we drive home and I'm like, Corey, I just wanted Danny to go. So funny thing, I think
It was through Communities First that we did
through-
the trash pickup.
Yeah, Step Up Pickup, yeah.
Yeah, that was
And Step Up Pickup's a great program, right? But
It
it's
was
like
so
2 weeks
good.
once a year.
Yeah. But
You
that's
know?
the thing. It's like that one encouragement to do that event has like our brains on it all the time now. So we, you know, obviously it's been winter and you can't go grab it, but we wanted to make it a thing for our whole office. So it is, you know, the community has to also take responsibility, right?
Yeah.
Like it can't all be on the council or the person running, like, you know, and I don't know, it just drives me insane. I'm like, if everybody just went and picked up a bag of trash, we would.
Or even if it was accessible, like the reason why we've noticed, we went through this whole place and we were picking in brushes and there was so much, but we couldn't do it. But then the power came through and they basically are moving the telephone poles back 4 feet. So they cleared out all this brush. So now every day we're like, once it's warm enough, we're getting out there and like we're can grab like as much trash as possible. But just like from one little change like this, now it's like, yeah, we can clean that up. No problem. We can clean that up in a day versus it would have took us weeks and weeks and we would have eventually been like, it's impossible.
You should have seen me and Kate in the woods picking up trash.
Well, it's great, and those are the things, like, how do we make that easy for our residents to do that?
Yeah.
But I also think, one thing a lot of cities have set up, and we have a version of it in our Downtown Development Authority, are sort of these authorities in commercial districts that focus on street lights, trash pickup, snow plowing. And, Detroit's done this, Grand Rapids has done this, Lansing has done this, where these authorities are also responsible, and they earn their revenue through kind of capturing some taxes through property values. But these authorities then exist, guided by local residents in those neighborhoods, to regularly clean up that trash. So, like, I'd say to people all the time, when you go to a clean, kind of welcoming commercial district, it's not necessarily just clean because all of a sudden there nobody litters, right. But here people litter. It's because there they've set up a system where somebody's coming around to pick up that trash, right? And this is something that we could create next month.
Yeah.
If we wanted to. We just haven't.
Right.
And so that's what I mean when I talk about a lot of these problems, these daily quality of life things being really solvable. We just got to choose that we want to solve them. It'd take nothing to introduce a corridor improvement authority ordinance next month. And talk about it. We just haven't done it.
Well, and I think too, I like what you're saying. Is just like you're also focusing on the fact that like this is important. This is important to the psyche. You know what I mean? Like every time I see a new building, I'm like, oh my God, something's coming in new. Like I don't care what it is, but just the fact that there's something new being happening. It kind of then you have all these people kind of like in the survival versus thrival mode. But it reminds me of like the study, like remember like they would basically take rats and they would put them in water and they would paddle and paddle and paddle, but eventually they would give up. And so, but what happened is the scientists would then pull them out of the water, warm them up, make them feel good, and then put them back into the water, and they would paddle indefinitely. Yeah. You know what I mean? But just because that they knew help was coming. Yeah. You know what I mean?
That things can get better, right? And I think for so long we've spent so much time focusing on, again, personality disagreements, individual fighting. Do I like you or not? The role of a council person is not to go there and find your 8 other best friends. Like the goal of a council person is to go there and do work. And regardless of how much you might agree or disagree with somebody, the only person on this world that I've agreed with on every issue at the time has been myself. And even then, sometimes I don't know. I'm like, well, maybe I didn't do this right? So you've got to go into this knowing that we're going to have disagreements, and not even small disagreements. We'll have big disagreements, like core disagreements. And yet through that, we've got to get things done. I'm a pretty personally progressive person. I'm a Democrat. And yet in my job, I regularly have to work with very conservative Republicans to get things done to bring resources back to the city of Flint and back to the communities we serve. Because it's like, maybe we don't agree on these 3 things, but on this thing we want to work on, we need to work together, and we need to get this done. And so I think that's the kind of energy we need on council where, all right, just because you and I didn't agree on these 3 issues or we voted a different way here, well, here's 2 things we do agree on. And I think residents want that. I don't think residents are happy when, their friend who lives in another state says, oh, I saw a video of Flint City Council and it was something, that's not, you're not feeling pride. I think that kind of us versus them politics is really toxic, and it turns people off, and it makes people not want to get engaged in their own government. And it's something that we need to change.
That's very like something I wanted to touch base on was people getting involved in the government. Like I feel like there's so many people, especially young people, that have no idea how to do that, where to start with that, or that their voice is even worth it. So this morning we were telling this whole younger class of kids, like, you are the next generation to help change Flint. And so if somebody were listening right now and they were wanting to know about city council or what they even do or who to contact or what would you tell them?
Well, I mean, a couple things, first thing, you can come to a city council meeting, right? They're public meetings. They're held every other Monday and Wednesday at City Council Chambers, 3rd floor, Flint City Hall, 1101 South Saginaw. And you can come, you can watch, you can see them go through ordinances and resolutions and these kind of things. And I'd also encourage folks, just reach out to your council person. A lot of council people are pretty responsive. If you want to talk to them and learn more about government, it's really, really important. But a big thing, something that I learned a lot from and wanted to get more involved in government when I was younger was volunteering on campaigns. Any campaign, and this is not a promotion for me, like any campaign you think that you're interested in or a candidate you're passionate about that you want to help get elected, go out and knock on doors, because you will learn more about your community walking neighborhoods, standing on people's porches, standing on people's front steps, and having a conversation with them about the specific things that are happening on their block or in their community or that they want to see addressed. And I think those are three kind of really easy ways you can get involved. But I always tell folks, go to public meetings, reach out to your elected officials, and go knock doors on a campaign or a nonpartisan issue that you're passionate about. This year it's an election year. There's going to be no shortage of opportunities for people that want to go out and knock on doors. Yeah. But you'll learn a lot, and you'll learn a lot about government. And there is something, I think, really beautiful about our system, in that it doesn't matter how powerful you are, from the president and the governor to a city council member to school board, that every so often you got to go out and convince average working class folks, who, it's a message that nobody's better than anybody else. It's a real message of equality that, whether you are, Governor Whitmer, or you're, a resident of Flint working in a hard job, long hours, everyone's got one vote. You're fully equal in that system, and how important it is to cast your vote and to get involved, because you can really make a big difference. But it's a great way to learn about democracy, just by getting out and talking to folks. And the same thing in my race. If I were to announce and make a bunch of great Facebook posts and have a great logo and and have a nice website, and I didn't spend 90% of my time knocking on doors, I'd lose by 1 billion points, and rightfully so, right? The way that you gotta get involved in things is you gotta spend time talking to people, and especially in Flint, people can smell out BS very easily. It's not hard, and we've had plenty of elected officials who have done that. So, I think those are big ways that folks can get involved.
I feel Flint is so ready for that change. Like they're just ready for something to give. So I'm excited about this election.
Yeah, it's a lot of opportunity.
Well, and city council, and so if people didn't understand what you did on city council, what would you say to them? Like, what does a council person do? What do you guys even do?
Yeah, so city council, right? It's the legislative body of our governing system has 3 branches: executive, legislative, judicial. Legislative body, city council writes and enacts ordinances. So everything from your grass can only be this tall to, how you got to treat dogs, to no drag racing, all those kind of laws. Local government, a lot of times we call them laws, we call them ordinances. City council has to approve and has control over the budget every year. So every, dollar that comes out of City Hall has to be approved by the city council. The mayor proposes a budget, the city council enacts a budget. But it also, it does things like it can write its own ordinances and laws, try to get those passed. And in the way our system works, the mayor has a lot of authority, but city council can override a mayoral veto with a 2/3 majority. So 6 members on council can enact an ordinance or a law, even if it's something that the mayor at the given time doesn't want to. But the summary really of it all is the council serves as the legislative body for the entire city, and everything from how high our water rate's going to be and how are we investing in our water system, to how much are we investing in our police and fire department and our ambulances, to are we getting a new playground at that park in your neighborhood? City council is going to be approving, denying, proposing, rejecting, all that stuff. So it's such an important body.
It is, and I think a lot of people, they focus on the big candidates like the president or the mayor. They don't realize the big decisions that are being made at, the council level.
No,
they have no idea. So.
Yeah. Well, and another thing too, that council members and sort of legislative kind of elected officials, whether it's your representative, your senator, also spend a lot of time too is just serving their constituents. Oh, you got a pothole on your road? All right, well, I'll report that to this office and I'll follow up and make sure that gets taken care of, or the street lights burnt out, or the boarded up house, the grass is too tall over here. We've had council members in the past. It was one thing former, now, may rest in peace, Councilman Eric Mays was very good at, And it was one thing that is a big reason why he was reelected several times, is that real focus on constituent services. How are we making sure that the issues that are popping up on your block are getting taken care of by city government? And I think, if anybody out there, wants to get involved or is passionate about these issues, being able to reach out to your council member and have those things addressed is so important. Because like we talked about earlier, sometimes people don't know who to call or what's the office I'm supposed to talk to, or, okay, well, did it get addressed? Did it not get addressed? Well, your council member's, there to serve you and try and help you with that.
That's good.
And then so just kind of harping on a little bit about just how the council works, like you guys basically have to make collective cities, but you're basically the representative of the voice for the 5th Ward, kind of, right?
Yeah, so our city's broken into 9 wards. So each ward's got equal population, and so the lines are redrawn every 10 years with the census to make sure that they remain equal population. And yeah, so Flint is an all ward-based council system, so there's no citywide council members. Some cities do that, we do not. And yeah, so this position that I'm running for is sort of to represent the 5th Ward and to be the voice of residents of the 5th Ward. And if folks don't know where that's at, it basically, you can think about it, kind of runs from Welch all the way down to I-69, catches, over to big parts of Mott Park, University Avenue, Kettering, and then on the other side, basically over to like I-475.
Yeah.
So with some changes around on the edges there, some of the lines zig and zag, but you can really think of it as those neighborhoods, just south of Bassett Park, Metawanini Hills by Cook School, Smith Village, University Park Estates, Carriage Town, University Avenue, most of Mott Park, downtown, the Grand Traverse neighborhood. Yeah, so that's really the core of the city if you think about it on a map.
Yeah, really like a vital area.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I'll brag it up, if I get elected, that both U of M, Flint, and Kettering University are in the 5th Ward. Hurley Hospital is in the 5th Ward. Most of downtown's in the 5th Ward. Some of our great old stately neighborhoods like Metawanini Hills up there just across from the old Cook School in the 5th Ward. University Park Estate's great middle-class neighborhood on North Saginaw.
And a lot of the work that you've done has actually already been in the 5th Ward. I mean, I know you've touched a lot of other parts, but that's kind of almost been one of your main focuses, right?
Yeah, well, I'd say in several of my jobs, when I was working in the Blight office, we did board-ups and cleanups constantly in the 5th Ward, whether we were working, again, with the Metawanini Hills Neighborhood Association, or the University Park Neighborhood Association, or the Central Park, or not Central Park, Carriage Town Neighborhood Association, or the Mott Park or Grand Traverse Neighborhood Association. The 5th Ward is very blessed in that almost every inch of it is covered by an active neighborhood group. Which is a lot of those folks step up. But then also in our work at Communities First, the Swayze Apartments on Court Street, the old Oak Street School, now it's Oak Street Senior Apartments, Georgia Manor, the Grand on University. I could run through a whole list, but are all projects and developments that are in the 5th Ward. Marion Hall, right at University of Martin Luther King. So yeah, a lot of our work's been here in the 5th Ward, trying to make improvements.
I love that. And I think it's just such a good fit for you because, when I think downtown, I'm like, where am I going to see Joel?
Yeah, that's very true.
Right?
You look for tall Joel where like any event we're at.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, it's an important thing. I think we've seen a good amount of investment in our downtown, and I want to really focus on making sure the DDA has the resources that it needs to function well. But also, how do we make sure that if you are living at Welch and DuPont, right, where right now if you drive by, it was for a long time, it's a great little commercial district right there. Big portion of it caught on fire last year. Bricks all fell in, still sitting there today. Every day when you drive by, 3 or 4 commercial buildings, just basically a pile of bricks. How do we make sure that we have a good downtown, but also that if you don't live downtown, you don't have to go downtown to have access to a walkable, healthy, thriving commercial district. In our city's history, we used to have those all over town. Yeah. And so I really want to focus on making sure that whether you're on Chevrolet over by Longfellow School, or if you're on Welch, or if you're on North Saginaw, north of Doyle Ryder, that you've got walkable, kind of easy to get to businesses and commercial districts and streets that you can access, and you can still go downtown, right? It's great. And we've seen Detroit's done a lot of this work in the last several years, whether it's been investments on McNichols or Livernois or in Southwest Detroit, kind of having to make sure that, you don't just have to go to downtown, but that you can also go to these kind of places in your own neighborhoods. Because I think rightfully some Flint residents feel that their neighborhood gets overlooked and that downtown gets a lot of investment. And downtown's an important neighborhood, but these commercial districts and our other neighborhoods are just as important, and we got to make sure that they're getting investment and resources too.
Yeah, I will say, like, I do feel like for a while there, like, every time I'd go down to Detroit, I was, like, in a different part of Detroit that I've never been. Like, when they do this.
Yeah, right.
Because, like, before it was, like, Detroit or Corktown.
Yeah.
And then maybe the Eastern Market.
Yeah, right. And that's something, and it's like a good, healthy city. We should have people all over town that, feel that their part of town is getting investment,
Yeah.
And it's one thing that I'd love to invest time in at the city is really investing in a lot of, what we call streetscape projects. The city owns everything from curb to curb and the sidewalks as well, right? And yet how many of our businesses, when you open up your door and you go out to the street, sidewalks all cracked up, street lights rusted out, the roads pockmarked. Those are things that the city fully controls, can invest in if it has the resources, tomorrow.
Right.
And we got to choose that we want to do that, because other cities are doing it and they're eating our lunch. Yeah. And we do live in like a competitive region. If you're looking to open a business, it's not that hard to go open it up 15 minutes in a different direction if we don't offer what people want.
Well, yeah, and I think, like, and that's kind of part of why, like, we started our Flint, Michigan Films is, like, I feel like one, Flint didn't, like, it's always been such a word-of-mouth town, and it didn't have a lot of competition, but now, like, you got Grand Blanc, you got Fenton, Flushing's doing things. Like, it seems like all of our surrounding towns are kind of, like, pulling things away.
And you can't blame them.
No.
They're doing what they think is best for their city, and the onus is on us to compete with them, which I think we can. We got more amenities, we got more institutions, we got more large financial resources than any of them. If we choose to make the right investments to get along, to end these us versus them politics, to focus on the basics, these are really solvable problems, but we got to spend the time to do that and not spend time fighting with each other.
Yeah.
We want to turn the Dort Highway into a whole, like, film studio area in downtown, like a Tyler Perry, but like Flint style.
That's so cool.
Yeah, you for it?
Right. Oh yeah.
Yeah, we're
absolutely.
gonna redo all these buildings. It's a big dream.
Right. One of the things that makes cities great is it's, there's Flint, again, like I said, 80,000 people with 80,000 different great ideas, and how do we give them space to do 80,000 cool things? And the support they need and the resources they need, and so that they feel like city government's, a supportive partner. And not something that they dread dealing with. Like, oh gosh, I got to go to City Hall because I got to deal with this thing, or I got to get this permit, or I got to do this. Nobody's going to, that's not the thing that excites people,
Yeah. I remember when I could pay my water bill online. I was pumped about that.
Right. These are the little things.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter though.
Right. But I've noticed, even, last couple of years, the amount of litter that I do see on the streets since we got these like giant trash carts, I see a lot less bags broken open on the side of the road than I used to see, a lot less animals getting into trash. And it's like, it seems like such a boring thing, right? Like trash carts, like let's spend time talking about trash carts, but it's not a boring thing when like now your block isn't covered with ripped open trash bags.
Yeah.
Man. It's been bothering my soul so bad.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I don't think I ever really noticed it until I came out here.
Yeah.
Like, when I get onto 75 where that red roof is at, and there's like that end of the red roof that goes towards the river, it's literally just a wall of trash.
Yeah.
I want to get them there so bad.
Yeah. Well, and a great example, a couple of years ago, Detroit set up a contract with the Michigan Department of Transportation where the city now, multiple times a year, mows and cleans out the trash on the side of 75. So next time you're driving into Detroit, check out the sides, just see what it looks like. You'll notice the grass is a lot shorter, there's a lot less trash.
Yeah.
It's a little thing, but it's a big thing.
Yeah, well, and it makes people feel more pride in their city.
Yeah.
Like how many people, if you got someone coming to visit you and the first thing they do is, they're getting off 475 or 69, and, like a great example, where I get off, if I'm coming back home, whether it's, let's say I'm coming back from a Michigan State game or something, I get off 69, I take a left turn. First thing on my left is a burned out basement.
Yeah.
Very first thing someone sees.
And
when they come to visit this city that I love, and like, that's going to stick in their brain, and you go a little further down the block, there's a house, the second floor caught on fire and this upper stairs is open and it's been open for a year.
Yeah.
And that stuff sticks in people's brains. And yet those are things we can fix. We're not sitting here trying to solve all the world's problems. We're trying to make sure that people that live in Flint get the same standard of like great city services that people in other communities just expect.
Yeah.
It's just like the air. But for us, it's not. And I think these are things that we can solve, and I think it's things that people want to see.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, do you think it's just because we've spent so much time as a city as survival mode that we just kind of we were like, we got to solve like all these big problems instead of like, just do the basics, like just catch the ball.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a big piece of that. I think for years, obviously we had things like emergency management where they didn't care nothing about this kind of stuff. Emergency manager's job is to balance the budget, and if that meant we're not going to cut the parks, we're not going to cut the parks. So that meant laying off half the cops, we're going to lay off half the cops. So that meant not putting the right treatment in the water, that meant we're not going to do it. And so when you had that kind of government for years that just wanted to disinvest, the most important thing is that the balance sheet looks even. You're not going to get investments in things like this, right? So I think that's a big chunk of it, obviously. And to a credit of the current administration and the current council, Flint's finally in a place. The city actually has a pretty healthy budget. We got a balanced budget. We've got fund reserves. Things like the American Rescue Plan, ARPA, that people may have heard a lot about, gave a chance for a lot of investment. So I think we're in a moment where we're finally not every budget looking over your shoulder like the emergency manager is coming. That we've got room to do some of this stuff. Yeah. But I think a big piece of it, make no mistake, like Lansing's consistent decision to just take over city government, abolish our democracy, and then make every decision by a bottom line, unsurprisingly, didn't lead to great outcomes.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I will say, just even for us, you were the recipient of an ARPA grant, and there's things that we've been talking about that we thought were going to be 2 years, 3 years down the road, and now because of it, we're going to do it this year.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think and to take it and you have a resource now, a community resource to where people can go to, where people can come and film, where people can be creative, where people can gather. You know what I mean? Because I will say, one of the big things we keep kind of finding out is just a lot of word of mouth doesn't work because a lot of the community's not gathering. So having these places for communities to gather and to engage each other, I think it's just really important work that I think, you're right, just gets overlooked.
Yeah. Well, and I think, right, when you think about that focus on the basics, right, is, how do we keep making investments in places like the McKinley Center and Brennan Center and the Haskell Community Center and Burston and the Mays Community Center? How do we keep strengthening those places? What we would call third places. It's not home, it's not work, but it's kind of an in-between space. And I think a great example of smart investment that we've done that in the last several years has been the Flint Public Library.
Yeah.
Right?
Man,
it's
gorgeous.
Gorgeous, right? My whole childhood, I was born in the early 90s. The Flint Public Library was it was a great library, but it was an old building, you could tell. And now you go in there. I mean, I was there last week on a Tuesday night at 7:00. And the place was packed.
Love it.
14 different meetings going on, people having a common place to gather. How do we kind of follow that model in these other community centers that we have in our city that have been disinvested? Now, that was expensive. That was an expensive project.
Yeah.
But it also was an example of partnership. If folks remember, the way they did that was they kind of came up with a deal where the Mott Foundation said, all right, we'll pitch in half. But the other half's going to have to come from a bond that the voters are going to have to approve, and the library's going to have to pay back with property tax revenue. And so the library went out, did the bond. Something like 75% of Flint voters voted yes. Yeah. Because we really value public spaces in this city. And then the foundation came in, they did the renovation, got delayed because of COVID, as everything did. But now when it reopened, that example of putting aside differences, not an us versus them politics, not, fighting, but just real nuts and bolts problem solving. Now we have this probably the nicest public library in Michigan.
It's so nice.
They
even had a garden out in front
over
the.
It's unbelievable.
I was eating cherry tomatoes off that thing. It was so good.
Right? And what a blessing. I get to bring, we've done events through Communities First there and other groups I'm in. And I used to bring it to town. And when you walk around, you feel so much pride.
You do.
This is our public library.
That whole area right there is real.
And the great thing about the Flint Public Library too is that is an institution that is owned by the people of Flint.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's not owned by somebody else. It's not owned by a private institution. That's our space, right? And that's and I think that the ease of using it or the access or whatever, what have you, is something that we also need to make sure we're doing at Haskell and we're doing at McKinley and we're doing at Brennan and we're doing at Mays Center, doing all over the city.
And so you'd have representation over the new Flint Central too, correct?
That's 7th Ward.
7th Ward.
Yep.
Copy.
So The 5th ward, if I was elected, includes like Doyle Ryder.
Okay.
It includes Durant Turry Mott. It includes most of the kind of public space, Atwood Stadium.
Copy. So you're
in the
just like outside of that.
Yeah, 475 is kind of the boundary there. So that
Copy.
Central Park neighborhood and Central's in the 7th ward.
You love Atwood.
Oh yeah, I'm a big Flint City Bucks
Yeah,
fan.
you
So
are.
I'm a regular. For everybody listening, I will be throughout the campaign, also in the River Rats, hitting the drum and having a good time. So yeah, I'm a big sports guy. So
That's my little go.
yeah,
We didn't get to go with you guys last year. We kept trying to hit a game with you guys, and we
plenty
never...
of time this year.
Yeah.
I know, this is the year, man.
I think we'll have a little bit more breathing room because we had literally just gotten this space when the Bucks started.
Yeah.
And we were like here every day, then working and everywhere. So it's like, let's enjoy Flint again in the summer this year. We did get to go to Alley Fest. We did get to go to Porch Fest. Yeah, we got to go to Porch Fest.
Hey, is your porch going to be in Porch Fest this year?
100%. Yes, it will.
Are you
Porch-
serious?
Yeah, of course it will.
Who's playing?
Well, we don't know yet.
Oh, well,
But
let's figure that
it's
out.
It's on the listing, for
I love it.
for a space. So our porch will 100% be
I
Porch
love
Fest.
that. I'm excited for you
it's
guys. You
amazing.
have the very cute home.
Well, thank you so much. I
You guys did
appreciate
a
that.
really good job.
Yeah, all credit
decorating it.
all credit to Kate.
Kate was killing it.
yeah.
She was so busy, that girl.
Hey, I got no interior design skills, so I try and be a supporter.
I love it. Supporting is good.
That's right.
Just
Yeah.
do whatever you want.
Carry
babe.
this thing
do
from
whatever.
here to there. Yeah, 100%. You need help? We're painting this room. Yes, we are.
Yes,
All right,
we
I'm
are.
in.
Yeah.
Do you guys have your separate offices upstairs?
We
I know
do.
you guys were working on that. Is that cool? You got your own
hell,
little
it's
space?
nice. Yeah.
I love
Gives
that.
me. It's it's good to have some of that like work from home space. if you
Yeah,
can get
for
it.
sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, we just put a gym in ours. That was our work for home.
Yeah, there you go. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, we got rid of the TV for the month,
Oh yeah.
and the only way we could watch it was if we were working out or like stretching or something.
That's
doing
smart.
something.
Or
Man, we
or
have-
stripping
we-
copper.
I need that
Or
kind of.
stripping copper. We won't talk about that, but
I need that kind of discipline.
Yeah.
I'm so proud of us.
Yeah.
This whole month we have been like on this health journey and holding each other accountable and
Yeah.
not watching TV, and it's not always been easy,
Yeah.
but
We have like an old house from like 1930s,
30s,
I
yeah.
think. Yeah,
Yeah.
like a 1930s, like your 840 square feet
Oh, yeah.
if you're lucky house. You
Yep.
know what I mean? But yeah, it definitely opened up the space to feel like, oh, cool. Now we just got like double the house.
yeah, that was weird. Like how much space we opened up just by.
Yeah.
Oh, now if we get mad at each other, he goes in the basement, or I.
It's a great. The joke
Yeah.
that I always made too, when we moved into this house, was if you have 2 bathrooms. I don't know if you have 2 bathrooms.
No.
Now
No, but you do, and I've
that's a
seen your
relation.
bathtub.
That's also a relationship level up.
Oh.
2 bathrooms. I tell.
Yeah.
I've
it's
always
so
had
nice.
2 bathrooms until we moved in together.
Yeah, and it's a tiny bathroom.
It's a tiny little bathroom.
yeah.
We figure it out. We make it work.
That's all right. That's all
I
right.
understand. We're gonna get 2 bathrooms next
I
time.
was
Yeah, our apartment before this house was small. Our apartment downtown was a small one bathroom in there.
You're like game changer.
Yeah,
I know
right.
Kate's loving it
Oh,
too,
absolutely.
man. Woo!
One day, the next house.
Yeah, right.
That's right next door to my house.
Yeah, there you go.
We've decided we want to take over the whole block. So
There you
I
go.
don't know if you knew this, but we live right next to Corey's mom and grandma.
Mm-hmm.
So and then the house on the other side of us is a corner lot. So it's
Ooh.
bigger
Yeah,
corner
triple lot.
Ooh,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
nice.
Like 1,100 whole square feet.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh,
So-
man! You're living in the Hamptons
I
over
know,
there.
right? Like,
So yeah,
I thought I was living large when I had a mini fridge in my garage. I was like, I've made it.
that's so funny.
Oh, so you got a garage? Yeah. See, I don't have a
Yeah.
garage in my house.
I will
you know?
say that was the nice
is
thing.
nice.
We
Yeah.
didn't get to use it at all last year because we won all this stuff in an auction. Like
One
lot
is a
of,
strong word,
yeah.
Received.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
received. Yeah, it was
like a 2-ton truck of equipment, Joel.
3.
I'm sorry,
Oh my god.
added 3
Was
tons.
that the house?
Yeah, it was
So they
all in the
in
garage.
the garage and in the basement. They
was
stored
all
it.
the gear.
Before you had this place.
Yeah.
Man, well, God
And we're
bless.
just
God,
clearing it out now.
God
Yeah.
bless the Dort Mall. All right, coming in clutch here to give you
I'm
somewhere
telling you.
to put that.
Have you been to the 810 Munchies there?
I have not yet. No.
We're trying to revive the Dort
Yeah, I
Mall,
see.
Joel.
When I was in high school, one of my good friends worked at Pirani's Hockey World in here.
He's still there?
Yeah. So it's a great space to come over here all the time.
I love
Yeah,
that.
yeah, we love that place because like you don't think of Pirani as like, oh, it's just like it's where you go get your hockey stuff, but you don't think of it as like there's 20, they have 26 different
it's
stores.
Huge. Like, if you're someone that like plays like hockey or lacrosse or whatever, that's like the spot.
Yeah. And they also have one in Canada now, so now they are like, they're international.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. This is like the OG one.
Yeah. And this is their headquarters. You know what I mean? Like they love it here. They're not moving, and
they're great Flint folks.
It's kind of great. Like those are like the little things that people just don't even think about, like the resources that we have here. Like that, I feel like when you go to smaller towns, you're like, what happened here? Where I feel like Flint's kind of like got that, like, oh, something happened here, but like they're working on it kind of thing.
Well, and we're blessed, and that's why when I talk about these problems being solvable, like this, if the more that we as elected officials and in city government can focus on partnerships, because the resources are out there. We are blessed. Do you know how many cities would kill? The community colleges in the city, not one but 2 universities are in the city. Like, of our 3 hospitals in our region, 2 of them are in the city. Like, the philanthropic sector in the city, county government's headquartered in the city, and this is, even just the county of Southwest, much richer in Oakland County. But, the headquarters of city government or county government is not in Pontiac.
Right.
A bunch of the health institutions are not in their core city, right? The community colleges are not in the core city, right? And yet here in Flint, we have those. And so sometimes it can make the problems even more frustrating sometimes. Because it's like, if we did a better job of partnering, of not trying to point fingers and blame this person or that person, but just focused on the issues and trying to solve them, I think we can get a lot more done. And then that pays off in people's daily life.
You're so right. And there's so many people in organizations, nonprofits, community people that there's so many of us out here that a lot of people are trying to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And if we all just try to do that same thing together, we would get a lot more done.
Yeah. Well, like I meant, like in the 5th Ward, I think every square inch of the 5th Ward is covered in some way, shape, or form by some community group doing something, and that's like a testament to our city. I think when I was working in the Blight office, we had something like 56 different neighborhood associations.
Wow.
I think there's a lot of people outside of Flint who think of our city as this place that doesn't have people that are investing in it, or that the residents just don't care. And I think nothing could be further from the truth.
So true.
What our residents need is support and resources and a city government that functions to serve them. But they're doing the work. We've got something like 72 parks, and I think the last time I had heard, we had something like 67 of those parks are adopted by a group of neighbors or a church or a business. So folks care about this city. And that's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about running is I think they just deserve a better city government, a better city council that is more responsive to their needs.
Yeah.
What do you think that is like in Flint it might be too broad of a question to ask, but just like, I won't say it's not quite crab in the bucket mentality, but it is just this very like, if I can't have it this way, then nobody can have it kind of thing.
Yeah, kind of like zero-sum thinking.
Yeah.
Sort of, a positive for you is a negative for me. I think some of that has come about through, like, I think we have to remember that a lot of the skepticism towards government, the skepticism toward institutions, is, like, very valid, right? The water crisis was a tragedy. I was living here in the city at the time. That was my water, right? That was the trust that was broken with all of us. But even before then, it was, massive disinvestment and demolishing of neighborhoods like St. John's and Floral Park. Before that, it was, block busting. When black neighbors, all they wanted to do is just buy a house. Realtors would take advantage of that and try and scare out all the white neighbors and then jack up the prices to sell them to black Flintstones. And before that, it's, redlining, the federal government encouraging disinvestment in urban neighborhoods, right? That's in the 30s. That's almost 100 years ago.
Right. And
so I think sometimes the zero-sum sort of mindset comes out of this history of genuine disinvestment, genuine racial prejudice, genuine class discrimination that happened to residents in our city. But I also do think that some of it has been amped up by politicians that see a benefit, because at an election, it is zero-sum. One of us is going to win and everybody else is going to lose, So technically, especially after a primary when there's only 2 candidates, right? Every vote that you get is a vote I'm not getting. And so there's a way to do politics that some people can try that's, I'm going to run a negative campaign. I'm going to make people hate you. I'm going to make people dislike you. And if they do that, then they'll vote for me, right? But what damage are you doing in the long run? I'd much rather run a campaign that's inspiring people and that isn't building this, you're the worst, so vote for me so you don't vote for this terrible guy. I want to inspire people so they want to vote for me, and not just tell people all the reasons why you suck. You know, that's our city doesn't need any more of that kind of politics. So in summary, you know, I think it's rooted in real discrimination, real disinvestment, real toxic policy. But some of it's also just, you know, we've had politicians in our past that's how they want to get elected.
Yeah.
Is us versus them, city versus suburb, this ward versus that ward, black versus white. And I don't think that helps our city. You know, our city's best when we celebrate our diversity and our residents and the things that make Flint a great place to live, not when we spend time fighting with each other.
So true.
But I mean, so is there anything that we've talked about that, like, you know, because I think what you like this talk is very like just very informative, very intuitive, very just like, you know. I don't think this needs to be one of those podcasts that go for like an hour and a half, 2 hours. But I just want to make sure, like, as we get ready to wrap up, if there's like things that you would want to talk about that we haven't discussed in general.
Yeah. You know, I'm trying to think, you know, of things that, you know, we could really dive into. I mean, I really want to just harp on this point of, you know, one of the reasons I'm so passionate about this and the reason why I want to do this is because I think over my years of working with Flint residents, you know, listening and learning from people, that I've learned how to work in governments, whether it's at the city level or the state level or the federal level, to try and like build coalitions to make a difference, to improve people's lives, right? And whether that's been at Communities First, whether that's been in city government, whether that's been at Friends of the Alley. You know, one group that I was a part of starting is a group called Strong Towns Flint. Where we advocate for things like how do we make safer streets, or how do we make it easier for a Flint resident to invest in their own house and not have city bureaucracy and red tape get in the way so that, oh, I can't even, you know, build a little apartment above my garage. I got extra space up there, but I can't lease it out, you know, and people run into those little things all the time. And so Strong Towns Flint has been an example of that. So, I say that I think I've shown folks that, you know, I have an ability to bring folks together to do this in a broad way, you know, to celebrate the richness and diversity of our city, and not to try and come in as like a, you know, the worst thing that people have in an elected official is somebody that thinks they already know everything, you know, that comes into office and is like, oh yeah, we know how to fix these problems, just elect me, I'll take care of it, sit it out for 4 years. You know, there's no way to win this if people aren't willing to get involved in a larger movement. We're not going to win this campaign if we don't knock on a bunch of doors. We're not going to win this campaign if we don't send a lot of postcards to folks, if we don't host a lot of events, if we don't make a lot of phone calls, if we don't meet people at their churches and their neighborhood associations. None of that's going to work. And so I think, you know, one of the big things that this campaign is going to focus on is trying to build up a grassroots coalition that's willing to invest in the time in that to talk to people. We're not trying to run a social media campaign. We're trying to run a campaign that's actually in your neighborhood, not on your block. And I'm going to, you know, walk my way through a few pair of shoes this summer and this fall, you know, God willing. And also, you know, try and meet people where they're at, because I think one of the most important things is that people can access their elected officials. You know, that you're not, oh, I called them and they haven't called me back, or, oh, I don't really know how to get in touch with them, or, you know, oh, I sent them an email and they haven't gotten back to me. This needs to be a thing where you feel like it's an easy to access person, and that it's a vision that inspires you, you know. And I hope that this message of like, these are solvable problems, you know, these are issues. We're not the only city to face these issues, you know, and we can address these things, and we've got a lot of great resources here to solve them, but we got to focus on solving them. Yeah. And, you know, I promise you, if the folks listening to this, if you elect me, I'm not going to be spending my time fighting with the mayor or fighting with other council members or, you know, screaming about who I don't like. I'll be spending time making sure you're getting a response first and foremost from city departments and from city agencies, but then also trying to do the little things that'll make a difference in your daily life.
I will say, I from all my interactions with you, I feel like I've heard, you know, people ask some big questions or say some outlandish stuff, and you're always really good at getting to the root of what they're trying to say and doing it in a way that is like, you can present it in a way that I think everybody can understand. And that's one thing that I've always really appreciated you. One is your cool temperament, and then just to say, well, wait a minute, the real problem is, you know what I mean? Like, so for you to be honed into those issues, just on the multiple times I've heard you just speak to people, I think is always impressive.
I appreciate that. Yeah. And I think a lot of that just comes from like learning from neighbors, right? And I remember when I was out knocking on doors, I've had some great mentors politically over my life and working on campaigns. And sometimes you knock on a door and let's say you wanted to knock on 100 doors that day, but you went to a porch and you wound up having an hour-long conversation with somebody, And in that hour, you kind of, it starts, they're really upset about something. And okay, but like, what are we really upset about here? Yeah. Like, let's get into this. And you can kind of take the time to get to the root of what somebody's really frustrated about. And that's where, for me, a lot of this focus on the basics come from. It was, 2.5, 3 years in the Blight office, every day getting, in the winter it was less because the grass isn't really growing. But in the summer, 40, 50, 60, 70 phone calls in a day from people that just want the little things taken care of in their neighborhood. And who just so often felt like they'd call City Hall and nobody would call them back. Or, the swing set's been broken in the park in their neighborhood for 5 years, and no one's looking at it. Yeah. And then they turn on the news and what do they see? 10-hour city council meeting where everybody yelled at each other, right? But you know what they weren't doing at that 10-hour city council meeting? Making sure that slide got fixed or making sure that swing set was fixed or making sure that street light was repaired. Yeah. And so every day, people fighting in a meeting doesn't fix anything. What makes a difference is, all right, we disagree with each other on these 3 or 4 things, but I think we can all agree that we need to invest in our public spaces and make them better. And let's end this toxic politics of if I don't agree with you on everything, I don't agree with you on anything.
Right.
That's not how life works.
Well, I think even to do that, like, you spend 10 hours fighting in a city council meeting. I don't think a lot of people know that you're not a full-time, like, paid. You know what I mean? Like,
it's a part-time.
It's a part-time gig.
Yeah, right. Yeah, every city council member, if they're not retired, has another full-time job that they're going to every day and working and I think we can be more efficient with our way of tackling these problems, but we gotta again want to do the work.
Yeah. And I think thing that is going to be a blessing for you that I see in you too is that you are so easy to talk to. Like, and I think that you're not scary. Do you know what I'm saying? Like sometimes I feel like even like young people, they don't want to talk to a person because they don't think that, they're what they have to say wants to be heard or, you know what I mean? Or that they have a point or something, but you're like cool Joe, like, you know what I mean? Like I feel like you can talk to all different types of people and still respect everybody in the same space and place and receive what they're hearing, no matter where they come from.
Yeah, and it's important, right?
It's important.
And I think one thing that I've learned through my years of working in politics and in government is, like, at the end of the day, like, I remember seeing an interview with that Obama gave once, and he was talking about, how people, it's like sometimes you get into these places of power, and then, in his job, right, you're going to meet with the president of this country or this UN official, and you sit down in a room, and everybody thinks that these really high-ranking people, they must be just like unbelievably intelligent or really savvy, and you sit down with them, and then you're sitting around, you kind of hear them talk, and you go, oh, wait a minute, oh, you're just like a guy, right? And so you kind of learn that like, if you're the governor or the president, the guy who's like running an auto shop on Corona Road probably knows a heck of a lot more than you about the things that are mattering in his world, and the status that we kind of give to some of these like super, high level titles or whatever, at the end of the day, they're just people. They're going home and going to bed and waking up. And I think it's important, too, to treat people that way when they talk to you, is that everybody's opinion has equal value in a democracy. Everybody's got one vote. A lot of people have fought like hell to make sure that everybody in our country has one vote. We haven't been that way for our whole history. We haven't been that way for most of it. And it's important that we keep it and defend it. But I think that also helps to like try and keep you chill is at the end of the day, it's like, this is Senator whatever, but it could just be like Bob, you don't know, he goes home, mows his lawn like everybody else does. And, he's nothing fancy. Yeah.
I think that is important, like to know is that, you can have a conversation with somebody that's trying to make a difference in the city and voice your opinion, and it does matter. Every Hugely. Voice matters.
Yeah, and I encourage folks, the worst thing you can do in politics is get cynical, right? Like, cynics have never accomplished anything, right? And I think sometimes we have this version of politics where cynicism is portrayed as wisdom. right? Like, oh, I've been around a long time, so I know it's not worth wasting your time on that, or it's not worth working on this. And I mean, nothing could be further from the truth, right? Like a great small example here is in our own state. For years, union organizers, the SEIU, the UAW, great folks worked to get a paid sick leave law passed in the state of Michigan, right? For how long do we have people? You work at, my first job when I was in high school was at KFC. I was a fry cook. And
so was I.
Hey, there you go. It's a small world. But like, the idea when I was like that if I got sick, I could like take some paid time off and like get healthy again, that didn't exist. And yet for years and years and years and years, people worked on a ballot initiative. Then the legislature tried to screw with it, and then they had to take it to court. And last year they passed a law that now every single worker in the state of Michigan gets paid sick leave, right? Yeah. Now people have been working on things like paid sick leave since the 1800s, since the beginning of the labor movement, right? And yet imagine if someone had just given up after 50 years of work or 80 years of work or 100 years of work, right? The people who today get paid sick leave wouldn't have that. And that's a single mom who now, is going to lose a day's pay because she has to stay home. But because people didn't get cynical and because people kept doing the work, we solved a problem. And so I think the biggest thing is that progress is possible, and it happens around us every day. And cynicism isn't going to get you anywhere in life. Like, being a cynic is not cool and it's not wise. It just means you're cynical. And I've been blessed to work with some great folks. My first boss out of college, Raul Garcia in the Blight office, when I was working for him, he had been in the Army, retired from the Army, then was at the Flint Fire Department, then became president of the Flint Firefighters Union, retired from that, and then came back out of retirement again to run the Blight office. And he was at the time 62, 63, been in Flint for 40 years, most optimistic, positive, we can fix this guy. And I remember working there at the time, I was 21, 22, being like, all right, well, I got 40 years till I can be cynical. This guy's 62, 63, out boarding up houses every day. So what do I got to be negative about? So I think that's so important because it's not cool to be a cynic or creative to be a cynic. It's just like, it can be sad.
It's got to be a defense mechanism, kind of.
It can be, yeah. And it's because I get it. People don't want to get hurt. It hurts to work really hard for something and then lose. Mm-hmm. And that's going to happen. Like, if you really stand up for what you believe in, you're going to lose sometimes. Like if I get elected to this seat, I guarantee I'll propose something that won't pass, or I might not, There's also the risk when you run for office that you don't get elected. You pour your heart and soul into something and you lose. But that just means that maybe at that moment that wasn't the right time. But you can't get cynical and just try and check out, because once you check out, you kind of hand a big win to the people that want you to check out, that don't want you to participate in your own democracy. Mm-hmm. And that's how democracies wither away and die and have a ton of problems.
Well, I think you hit on something that, like, just sometimes too things take time, and I think sometimes we're very impatient people.
Well, I always think, right, between the real nerd out moment here on the podcast, sorry general public, but the first time that like a universal healthcare program was ever introduced or proposed was Teddy Roosevelt in 1912. Mm-hmm. And when the Affordable Care Act was passed, Obamacare, 2010. Yeah. That's 98 years between those two initiatives, right? Mm-hmm. And now how many Flint residents today have Medicaid coverage or subsidized insurance plans, or their employer insurance is better? Because for 98 freaking years, people didn't just say, all right, well, it's never going to happen, And after the water crisis happened, one thing we were able to do in this city was expand Medicaid even more to make sure that especially mothers with children had coverage so that they can get the nutrition and the medical care that they need. And that's like stuff that's not sexy to, be working on that and you got to lose a lot, but you get there over time, and these are the things that really, really matter. And like the wheels of government move slowly. The wheels of democracy move really slowly. Mm. But if you do it and if you work at it, these are problems you can win.
And then also even some of that is kind of by design. Like, you talked a lot about like 475, and that was like, the thing happened almost immediately, mm-hmm. kind of, you know what I mean? And now it's like, well, let's do a survey or two.
Right. And that's the thing, right? You have these systems that just, the things that built us 475 and 69 right through the heart of the city are things that cut out an entire class of our city. So you had a not fully inclusive democracy, concentrating power in the hands of a couple of people. And the problem there too is even if you think you're doing good, because if you think you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, if you're doing it from such a checkered or limited worldview, you can make a ton of mistakes. And that's why it's so important, especially to do things like a campaign where you're out knocking on doors and you're out actually meeting people where they're at. And you're not just spending a bunch of time with a bunch of people that are the same race as you or the same income as you or the same gender as you, all talking about how smart you are and how impressive you are. Because you get a little bit, more, you get a little bit too, your head gets big and you start making mistakes, and you start hurting people because you're not in touch. One thing that I always loved when he was president, Obama would do this thing every single day where at the end of his day, he would read 10 letters from American citizens and write them back.
Wow.
And he always talked about how it was like a grounding exercise. You spend all day talking about military operations here and a Senate negotiation here, but you end your day with like, okay, here's like 10 normal citizens that have a problem that they want you to get back to them about. And that's the stuff that on council I'm committed to is, you want to call me up. You want to send me an email. You want to come to your neighborhood group. Or if you just got an issue you want to get fixed, you'll never have to worry about trying to find me or figure out where I'm at or be available for something.
I love that. Well, I always start off with a question, and then she'll have a little bit like an ending kind of for this, but first, we're just going to say thank you for coming on the podcast.
Well, thank you for the invite.
You're
I really
best.
appreciate it. Hey, thanks, guys.
Where can people find you?
Yeah, so you can head to votejoelarnold.com. Pretty straightforward right there. And on there, you'll find our campaign phone number, our campaign email. All that stuff is available on there. So just head to votejoelarnold.com. You can get involved. You can sign up to volunteer. You can make a contribution. You can just sign up for email updates if you just want to know what we're working on. And then just throughout the year, we're on social media. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We try to be where people are at. But if you head there, that's a really easy way to get involved and to touch base with us and again, become a part of the campaign.
If you had one wish, what would be your one wish or one hope for Flint?
I think an end to the divisive us versus them politics that we've seen, because everything flows from that. I think of all the opportunities to address a problem that we miss because we're so focused on who we don't like and not what we're trying to solve. If you wake up every day and your focus is how much you dislike a person and not how much you want to solve a problem, then public office isn't for you. And you shouldn't be doing this. And so I think the more that we can get to a place where we're going to have disagreements. If I get elected, I promise you I will have disagreements with my fellow council members. But we can have those disagreements politely, civilly, maybe in private, and figure out what's a great way to compromise on this. What's a middle point on this? And that's going to be a lot more healthy politics than a politics of division, a politics of hate, a politics of pointing fingers. Because if your street's messed up or the vacant building down the block has people squatting in it and maybe gets caught on fire because someone's trying to stay warm in the winter, and then that burned out house can be there for 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 years. You don't care at all who likes who and doesn't like who on council or in the mayor's office, right? What you want is that problem to be fixed. And I think if we can end the toxic and divisive politics in our city, that just gives you the space to work on stuff. Because I think everybody that is in those seats wants to improve this city and wants to make a difference. And we got to set up the kind of ecosystem and the political norms that make that possible.
That's good. And then I like to end the podcast. So every guest leaves a question for the next guest. So our last guest was Mama Soul.
Okay.
And her question for you is something you would say to someone that's meaningful. What's something you would say to someone that's meaningful?
Is what I'm saying meaningful, or are we saying a particularly meaningful person?
Yes, just something you would say.
Yeah.
No particular person.
Yeah.
What's something meaningful?
I think maybe this is, kind of saying what I was saying a little bit earlier, but, there's no joy in becoming a cynic or benefit in becoming a cynic. Whatever it is you're working on, whatever problem it is you're trying to solve, or in your own relationships or your job, it's not cool and it's not wise, and you're not more learned because you're cynical about something, you know? Mm-hmm. And in a lot of ways it means that, no, it's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to be angry. And, you know, it's okay to be skeptical. But when you've gotten to a point where you're cynical and you think that trying is not cool, or, you know, trying to make a difference is out of style, you know, then you're just letting other people win. So keep optimism, you know, and like keep a knowledge that problems are solvable, and don't like ever give in to cynicism, you know, no matter how old or how many struggles you've been through, and everybody's dealing with something in their life. And you know, it's important to keep good mental health, and it's okay to be angry. It's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to be, you know, beat down sometimes, but just don't ever just be that person that just gives into cynicism, because it's certainly not the path to becoming a happy person.
Yeah.
That was definitely me this morning.
I was literally just here like, Joel, we had this moment where I was like, what can we tell people who are sometimes tired, that feel like, you know, like, man, like we have to, sometimes it's like, it's exhausting, right? Run a business and do the things. And, you know, luckily we have an amazing team and we have great people to encourage us. But sometimes we'll look at each other, him or I, will be like, I'm tired, man. I want to wrap this up and move out of here. You know what I'm saying?
You know,
like,
you go home, go to bed early, you know, call it a night,
like,
have a beer, and just chill. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. But
yeah, so, I mean, do you have is somebody that's in a place right now where they feel like that, or they're being cynical and don't even realize that that's what that is? How would you encourage them? What would you say?
Yeah. You know, I would say, you know, really lean on people around you.
Yeah.
You know, I'm only where I am because I've had great people in my life. And that's been my family, that's been my friends, that's been my faith community, that's been, you know, people in Flint that have taught me so much. You know, it's one of the reasons I feel so compelled to give back. But, you know, the worst thing you can try and do is like suffer alone. And that's not to say bring other people into suffering.
Right.
But lean on people to help you.
Yeah.
You know, because I've been through, you know, things in my life that have been a huge challenge that I've had to work through. And, you know, I look back on them and I'm always like, thank God I had, you know, loving siblings and friends and parents and a community that wanted to support me. You know, and that doesn't mean you have to always be happy and you got to always be on or something. Like, that's not realistic.
Yeah.
But, you know, it does mean that, you know, lean on people around you. Because I think sometimes when people feel the most like they can't get out of something or they can't solve something is when they're the most isolated. And sometimes you need to be the person who's not like taking on the whole load. You know?
I feel like I just went to therapy, y'all. I think I needed to hear that. Thanks, buddy.
There you go. Yeah. I'm a proud, you know, been to many a therapy session myself.
Yesterday, it was funny. I think I even posted this on Facebook. I was like, I feel like it's a day where I'm being tested, and I've resorted to going to my basement with my cat, and that's where I stayed for a little bit, and I totally needed it. But there was a whole point of what I was going to say about that. Anyways, it was one of those days. Corey had one this morning. It might come back to me.
Okay.
So I asked, so you answered the question. Now you have to pick one of three. There's 3 questions. Pick one of them to leave for the next guest. Okay. So the questions are, what's one question you would like to ask the next guest? Something you would say to someone that's meaningful, or leave one truth or lesson or reminder that's been important to you. What one would you like to leave the next guest that we can't tell you who it is, though?
Yeah.
It's a secret.
Even from us.
Let's do the question one.
So we're going to do the what's one question you would like to ask the next guest?
Yeah.
All right, you have to write that down and then sign it.
All right.
And then this is my list of all of my podcast guests that have joined us, which has been so fun. Thank you again for joining.
Hey, happy to be here. I appreciate the invite.
Hey, when does volleyball start? Because you're the guy that tells us.
I think it's like early June.
Okay.
So if you want to come out, you know, all the listeners to this podcast and see some of the most okay volleyball you've seen in your life.
We might win 2 games this season.
Hey, we might. You know, the options are there.
Volley Llamas for life.
That's right.
Volley Llama. Who came up with that name?
I don't even remember who came up with that.
It was a pretty good one. It is a good one.
The Volley Llamas.
I think it was a joint effort.
That's a pretty good one. We need to get T-shirts made this year.
Yeah, you do.
They'll say Volt Joel.
There you go. Right. We will have merch.
Of course. I love it. Thank you so much again.
Absolutely.
Appreciate you. Put your name on there.
Oh yeah. Sorry about
You
that.
got to sign that.
Maybe
Mama
that.
Soul forgot to sign it. We got to take that
I'm
back.
Following.
Well, you find her on Monday.
Tomorrow.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Tomorrow. God. What? I time travel every now and
Yeah,
again.
you did.
Just
I love it. Anything else you want to say, CT?
No, man. Just thank you for coming and thanks for appreciating it. Thanks for being here and that's it. I think that's good.
That's a wrap.
Thanks.
And at the